Ladies and gentlemen, this is Community Radio Networks. Today is Monday, the 4th of March. And we are going to get you all the information that you need here to take on the day today. As a matter of fact, to get your week started. We'll start with the world news coming up for you next. This is Community Radio Networks, the world news. Shehbaz Sharif was sworn in as Pakistan's new Prime Minister this morning after being elected a day earlier in a raucous parliamentary session. He held the same position from April 2022 to August of 23, replacing arch rival Imran Khan, who was kicked out of the job after a no-confidence vote. Shehbaz is the younger brother of three-time Premier Nawaz Sharif. His appointment is controversial because of parliamentary elections last month that his opponents claim were rigged in his favour. Khan's Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf Party, the PTI, insisted it did better in the poll, but that electoral theft and other irregularities deprived it of a parliamentary majority. Sharif's Pakistan Muslim League Party, the PMLN, didn't win enough seats to form a government, but went into coalition with others to get a majority, clearing his path to a second premiership. PMLN leader Shehbaz Sharif, sworn in as the 24th Prime Minister of Pakistan in Pakistan's 77-year history. He was administered oath by President Ali Dewan Sadr. The ceremony was attended by Nawaz Sharif, former President Asif Ali Zardari, PPP Chairman Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, and the Chief Ministers of all Sindh, Punjab and Balochistan. Chief of Army Staff General Asim Munir was also in attendance. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif presented with the Guard of Honour by smartly turned out personnel of the armed forces at the Prime Minister's house in Islamabad. Following the ceremony, he formally took charge as the Chief Executive of the country. And PMLN Supremo Nawaz Sharif and his daughter Mariam in Islamabad, as Shehbaz Sharif was sworn in as the Premier for the second time. The PTI has demanded that his founder and ex-Premier Imran Khan, his wife Bushra Bibi, other party leaders and women workers be released before it agrees to a dialogue with its political rivals. As newly elected Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif came into the National Assembly to attend today's proceedings. He was greeted by the MNAs, including PPP Chairman Bilawal Bhutto Zardari and PMLN's Khwaja Asif. In his maiden speech during the session of the newly elected National Assembly, PPP Chairman Bilawal Bhutto Zardari endorsed the PTI's call for a judicial inquiry into the May 9th riots. We have Bishop Azad Marshall, the president of the Bishop Church of Pakistan, congratulating newly elected Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif on his ascendancy to the role. Pakistan, under the leadership of Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and the new government, could achieve a greater accomplishment in the cause of national development, according to a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson. And Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has congratulated Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif on his election as the Prime Minister. Iranian conservatives secured the bulk of seats in elections for a key clerical body and the national legislature, estimating a record low turnout. Authorities still counting ballots 2 days after Friday's vote for members of parliament and for the Assembly of Experts, which selects the Islamic Republic's supreme leader. The election, in which a vetting process barred from hopefuls from running, took place with Iran suffering a severe economic crisis deepened by international sanctions. Turnout in the capital of Tehran was around 25%, and some seats have gone to a second round, which will take place in either April or May. The U.S. military successfully made its first airdrop of humanitarian supplies into the Gaza Strip over the weekend, with officials saying the cargo included food supplies sufficient for close to 40,000 meals. The delivery, expected to be the first of many, came 2 days after a deadly scene unfolded as Palestinian crowds rushed to receive supplies from a convoy of trucks. UN officials have said 1/4 of Gaza's 2.3 million people are on the brink of famine. And yesterday, Vice President Kamala Harris called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza for what she called the immense suffering of people in the country who are starving. She shared her thoughts while discussing a deal that could include the remaining hostages taken by Hamas to be returned to Israel in exchange for that ceasefire. Efforts to install a ceasefire have increased in recent days, with many looking to get a deal done before the holy month of Ramadan starts on the 10th of this month. Vice President Kamala Harris calling for this proposed 6-week ceasefire deal in the Israel-Hamas conflict to be accepted, while criticizing Israel over insufficient aid deliveries into Gaza. She bluntly called out Israel for not doing enough to ease a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, as the Biden administration faces increasing pressure to rein in its close ally while it wages war with Hamas militants. A growing number of children in Gaza are dying from dehydration and malnutrition, and the Israeli government must do more to significantly increase the flow of aid. Her comments also come at a critical moment in the Israel-Hamas war. Today, the Vice President is expected to meet with a key member of the Israeli War Cabinet, Benny Gantz, in Washington, as the U.S. continues to advocate a temporary ceasefire and hostage release. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rebuked this top cabinet minister arriving in Washington yesterday for talks with U.S. officials, signaling widening cracks within the country's leadership nearly 5 months into its war with Hamas. And Hamas militant Mahmoud Mohammed Abdulkad, eliminated in a joint intelligence-based IDF and Israel Security Agency operation. He was eliminated in this aerial strike in the Gaza Strip yesterday. He was responsible for recruiting Hamas terrorist operatives for the Zaytun battalions and also engaged in raising funds used for terrorism. Meanwhile, Hezbollah attacked an Israeli military force in southern Lebanon, causing casualties. Hezbollah added that its fighters struck an Israeli surveillance system near the border. Israel has not made any comments so far on any casualties in that attack. Israeli forces swept into the Palestinian administrative capital of Ramallah in the occupied bank overnight. And Israeli military has completed a preliminary review of civilian deaths at the Gaza aid envoy last week, which determined that forces did not strike the convoy and that most Palestinians died in a stampede. At least 30,534 Palestinians have been killed and 71,920 injured in Israel's military offensive on Gaza since the 7th of October. And the Palestinian Prisoners Club has announced that the total number of Palestinians arrested by Israel in the occupied West Bank has reached 7,340. The Gaza Health Ministry has said it had detected about 1 million cases of infectious diseases without having the necessary medical capabilities to treat them. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas will visit Turkey next week for talks about the Gaza conflict and reconciliation efforts between Palestinian factions. Mediators and Hamas envoys have made significant progress towards a Gaza truce. Meanwhile, an Italian Navy destroyer shot down a drone that was approaching it in the Red Sea, where Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels are attacking shipping. Yemen's Houthis vowed to continue targeting British ships in the Gulf of Aden following the sinking of UK-owned vessel Rubimar. A Supreme Court decision could come as soon as today in the case about whether former President Trump can be kicked off the ballot over his effort to undo his defeat in the 2020 election. He's challenging a groundbreaking decision by the Colorado Supreme Court that said he's disqualified from being president again and ineligible for the state's primary, which is tomorrow. The Supreme Court set to announce at least one opinion this morning, leading to speculation that justices could rule on Donald Trump's eligibility for the Colorado ballot the day before Super Tuesday tomorrow. The Supreme Court announcing it would issue at least one decision. In this unusual announcement, the Supreme Court shared it would be releasing this opinion, meaning a decision on whether or not former President Trump can remain on the ballot could be coming any time. Nikki Haley won her first presidential primary yesterday. She just had to wait for the D.C. insider crowd to vote. She defeated Donald Trump in the Washington, D.C. Republican primary, a contest that took place over the weekend in a downtown hotel, just steps away from the heart of D.C.'s lobbying hub. She carried nearly 63% of that vote. And her victory came after she was crushed by Trump in caucuses in Missouri and Idaho and at a Republican convention in Michigan on Saturday. Former President Trump's spin on losing yesterday's GOP presidential primary in Washington, D.C. to Nikki Haley was summed up by many critics with one word: pathetic. Nikki Haley has crisscrossed the country in the days leading up to Super Tuesday tomorrow with a private pitch to donors about why they should keep giving her money. But according to 6 sources who have heard it, that plan has been missing a key element, a potential path to victory over former President Trump. She is going to be in Fort Worth today. A defining week in politics will clarify the choice Americans will face in November in a fateful and unprecedented election that is already testing long-held interpretations of the Constitution and the powers of the presidency. Super Tuesday tomorrow is when the largest number of states will be holding presidential primaries or caucuses. Rarely have intra-party battles between Republicans in Texas been as bitter, protracted, and consequential as the primary contest culminating in Election Day tomorrow. The fights have primarily focused on members of the Texas House who angered many conservative voters last year by impeaching the Republican Attorney General Ken Paxton on charges of corruption and abuse of office. Paxton, who was acquitted in the Texas Senate, vowed revenge, and number one in his sights has been the House Speaker, Dade Phelan. Governor Greg Abbott has also been going after a number of Republicans in the Texas House, seeking to unseat those who opposed his plan to use public money to help families pay for private and religious schools. Firefighters, meanwhile, racing to wrangle the largest blaze in Texas history, could get their best chances in days to contain the flames as a cold front sweeps into the region today, where hot air and raging winds fuel the infernos, reducing entire neighborhoods to rubble and inflicting harrowing injuries upon ranchers' livestock. The influx of cooler temperatures and subdued winds is expected to arrive today and last through tomorrow, giving firefighters a reprieve from the critical fire risk conditions that have aided the wildfire's explosive spread over the Texas Panhandle. A disaster relief organization established in 2022 after the Eastern fire is now in full gear, trying to help those affected by the wildfire roaring through Texas. And the sprint to stave off a partial government shutdown is set to collide with President Biden's State of the Union address this week as the president prepares to go face-to-face with some of his fiercest GOP opponents, who sharply criticize his handling of spending matters one day before the funding deadline. His State of the Union address is scheduled for Thursday evening, and Congress is staring down a midnight Friday government funding deadline, 2 days that are laying the foundation for a high-stakes 24 hours on Capitol Hill. Vice President Kamala Harris told thousands gathered for the 59th anniversary of the bloody Sunday attacks on civil rights marchers in Selma, Alabama, that fundamental freedoms, including the right to vote, are under attack in America even today. She joined those gathered at the foot of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where voting rights activists were beaten back by law enforcement officers in 1965. The Vice President praised the marchers' bravery for engaging in a defining moment of the civil rights struggle. And a major blizzard shut down much of California, Sierra Nevada over the weekend as nearly 200 miles per hour winds in the snow up to 12 feet deep blocked roads, shuttered ski resorts, and knocked out power for thousands. Early readings suggest the precipitation could mark one of the region's 10 snowiest days since the 1970s. Hundreds of miles of California highways shut down as this powerful blizzard pounded parts of the Golden State and Mountain West, dumping heavy snow and bringing howling winds with gusts that hit 190 miles per hour, well above the 157 miles per hour threshold for a Category 5 hurricane. Despite the rain this weekend, protesters packed the streets of San Francisco. A show of support for the Jewish community rallied against a rise in anti-Semitism. And the government of Haiti declared a 72-hour state of emergency yesterday after armed gangs stormed the major Port-au-Prince prison. At least 12 people were killed and about 3,700 inmates escaped in this jailbreak. Gang leaders say they want to force the resignation of Prime Minister Ariel Henry, who had traveled abroad. The groups aiming to oust him control around 80% of Port-au-Prince. Violent gangs wars have killed thousands in the country since the year 2020. A soiree to be attended by the Prime Ministers of Canada and Italy in Toronto was cancelled over security concerns. Hundreds of pro-Palestinian demonstrators have gathered in front of the Art Gallery of Ontario, where Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was due to host his Italian counterpart, Giorgio Meloni. And unknown individuals damaged the pillar of a railway bridge in Russia's Samara Oblast using explosives this morning. Russia continues to suffer losses in its war of aggression against Ukraine. Over the past 24 hours, Russia has lost 1,150 soldiers and 8 tanks, 21 armored combat vehicles, and 22 artillery systems. Russian forces suffered an average of 983 casualties per day in Ukraine last month, the highest since the war began. A series of swift Russian Russian advances have challenged Ukraine's new line of defense set up after their withdrawal from the key town of Avdiivka, and raising fears about Kyiv's tactics and momentum on the front lines. Russian President Putin has promised to boost the living standards of his countrymen with big new plans over the next 6 years. There's just at least one major problem. His promises aren't in the budget. He made the comments during his annual State of the Nation address, speaking 2 weeks before Russia's presidential election, which he is expected to win against 3 opponents. A presidential term in Russia is 6 years long. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan called for discussions on a ceasefire in Ukraine to begin following a diplomatic forum in the Turkish city of Antalya. German authorities said they were investigating after an audio recording in which the German military officers purportedly discussed support for Ukraine, including the potential use of Taurus missiles, was published in Ukraine. Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who was in Rome, called it a very serious matter and said that German authorities were working to clarify the matter very carefully. Leaked audio obtained by Russian spies and later broadcast by the Russian state-controlled news network shows that top German officials were discussing these plans to possibly send Ukraine long-range missiles that can take out the key Crimean bridge. There are more and more older women showing up at demonstrations taking place throughout Germany against the rise of the far right. Germany has been rocked by the rise of far-right extremism for months, but when an investigative report by outlet Corrective revealed that members from the far-right Alternative for Germany and other parties had attended a meeting where a secret master plan to deport migrants on a large scale was discussed, something changed and people began to take the streets in growing numbers. Abuse of public funds, failing hospitals, potholes in the streets of Kampala, the capital of Uganda. These and other issues feature in an online protest campaign that is rattling government officials and others in this East African country, where street protests are practically outlawed and where corruption is widespread and often deadly. Saudi Arabia launched its campaign to host the 2034 FIFA World Cup today, a bid that is all but certain to succeed due to the absence of any other expressions of interest before global governing body's deadline late last year. The campaign is under the slogan Growing Together. The Saudi Arabian Football Federation revealed its bid logo, website, as well as a short bid film that celebrates the passion, spirit and diversity of football in Saudi Arabia. Australia's captain Pat Cummins, he praised on teammates Nathan Lyon and Cameron Green for match-winning performances as his side secured a 172-run triumph over New Zealand in the first test. And an increasingly assertive China and a humanitarian crisis in Myanmar are likely to be high on the agenda when Southeast Asian leaders meet in Australia for a rare summit this week. The ASEAN-Australia Special Summit that starts in Melbourne today marks 50 years since Australia became the first official partner of the Asian bloc. Leaders of 9 of the 10 Association of Southeast Asian Nations are expected to attend the 3-day summit, with Myanmar excluded from political representation over its failure to stem violence in that country since the military junta seized control in 2021. And East Timor's leader has been invited as an official ASEAN observer, and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese invited his New Zealand counterpart to Melbourne to meet regional leaders. Meanwhile, it is in further news out of Asia that China's government said it is eliminating an annual news conference by the premier. That was one of the rare times a top Chinese leader took questions from journalists. The spokesperson for the National People's Congress said on the eve of the opening of the legislature's annual session that Premier Li Qiang would not hold that news conference at its conclusion, as it has every year since 1993. Thousands of South Korean doctors protested in Seoul in escalating standoff with the government over medical training reforms, which has seen junior doctors quit, and it is around 10,000 junior doctors that have quit and stopped working nearly 2 weeks ago to protest hikes to medical school admissions from next year, meant to combat shortages and an aging society. South Korea's government began steps today to suspend the medical licenses of these thousands of striking junior doctors days after they missed a government-set deadline to end their joint walkouts, which have severely impacted hospital operations. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Community Radio networks, and a Thai court acquitted former Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra, now living in exile, on charges of mishandling funds for a government project in 2013, the latest legal victory for the powerful family of former Premier Thaksin Shinawatra. And the action comes shortly after Thaksin, Yingluck's brother, was released on parole for corruption-related offences. Last year, he returned home after more than a decade of self-imposed exile and was detained in a hospital for 6 months before being granted clemency because of his age and ill health. The Indian men's and women's TT teams today made history by securing their first ever qualification for the Olympics based on world rankings following the conclusion of the World Team Championships finals held in Busan, which marked the final qualifying opportunity for the Paris Olympics. 7 spots in the team events were yet to be filled. India's in-form opener Yashasvi Jaiswal has earned his first nomination for the ICC Men's Player of the Month award for February 2024. His outstanding performances in tests against England played a crucial role in India's comeback after trailing 1-0 following the loss in the Hyderabad test. And India's series clinching win over England in Ranchi finds much more perspective when the English weather of Dharamsala, the venue for the 5th and final test, is taken into consideration. The hosts defeated England in the 4th test to take an unassailable 3-1 lead in the series, which turned the match in Dharamsala only significant in terms of the World Test Championship points. In a dazzling display of all-round prowess, Shardul Thakur played a pivotal role as Mumbai clinically dismantled Tamil Nadu, securing a resounding victory by an innings and a massive 70-run margin within 3 days to advance to the final of the Ranji Trophy in Mumbai today. And 10 years after the mysterious disappearance of Malaysian flight MH370 with 239 people on board, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim today said he would be happy to reopen the search for the plane if compelling evidence emerged. The Indian Navy will commission the newly conducted MH60R Seahawk, a maritime variant of the Black Hawk helicopter, multi-role helicopter, at the INS Garuda in Kerala's Kochi, marking a pivotal moment in India's defence modernization journey. And in a significant move, the Supreme Court of India today said that members of Parliament and members of the Legislative Assembly cannot claim immunity from prosecution in cases of bribery for votes or speeches in the House. The Supreme Court criticized Tamil Nadu Minister Udayanidhi Stalin for his eradicating Sanatan Dharma remarks. It asked the DMK leader why he approached the top court after abusing his right to freedom of speech, indicating that State Minister Vikramaditya Singh had spoken with AICC leadership. Party sources today claim that the Congress government in Himachal Pradesh is not in danger and will complete its 5-year term. New Delhi Chief Minister and Aam Aadmi Party Supremo Arvind Kejriwal has decided to appear before the Enforcement Directorate after the 12th of this month in the excise police case. He'll appear via video conference, and this came in response to ED's 8th summons to Kejriwal on the 27th of last month. The BJP leaders added Modi Ka Parivar to their social media bios a day after RJD President Lalu Prasad stirred a controversy with his remark, "What can we do if Prime Minister Modi does not have a family of his own to counter PM's charges of dynasty politics?" The Prime Minister also responded to Lalu's attack and said, "Mera Bharat, Mera Parivar." The head of India's space research organization ISRO's S. Somnath revealed in an interview that he received a cancer diagnosis the day Aditya L1, the country's first solar observatory, was launched. On the 2nd of September, the sun-studding Aditya L1 mission was launched atop PSLV C-57. But during all the excitement surrounding this momentous occasion, Somnath's personal health took an unexpected turn. The death toll from torrential rain and snowfall in different parts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa has reached 27, including 18 children. Besides, at least 38 people, including 20 children, were injured in several incidents related to rain and snowfall over the past 2 days, according to the Provincial Disaster Management Authority. Meanwhile, major roads remain closed in Gilgit-Baltistan, leaving thousands stranded in the region. Power and water supply and communication services also severely hit in many areas. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the world news for you today. Stay tuned. We'll have the financial news coming up shortly. Let's go ahead and get you now the financial news that is coming up here for you. The financial news to get your week started on this Monday, the 4th of March, and we'll start with the foreign currency exchange rates that we bring to you every morning. The Indian rupee is at 82.91, the Pakistani rupee at 279.44, Bangladeshi taka at 109.76, the Sri Lankan rupee at 308.22, Nepalese rupee 132.72, the British pound at 0.79, the euro at 0.92, the Canadian dollar 1.36, the Australian dollar 1.53, Mexican peso 17.01, Chinese yuan 7.20, Japanese yen 150.49, the Russian ruble at 91.16, the Thai baht at 35.82, and the Turkish lira at 31.53. Congressional leaders finally reveal long-awaited bipartisan bills to fund parts of the government for most of the year, setting off a bicameral sprint to avert looming shutdown threats in less than a week. The weekend rollout entails 6 full-year spending bills to fund a slew of agencies until early fall. And these include the Departments of Agriculture, Interior, Transportation, Housing and Urban Development, Veterans Affairs, Justice, Commerce and Energy. The 1,050-page bipartisan package includes more than $450 billion in funding for fiscal year 2024. And lawmakers have until this Friday to pass the legislation or risk a partial government shutdown under a stopgap plan President Biden signed into law to buy more time for spending talks. And spending at U.S. retailers, meanwhile, tumbled much more than expected in January as cold weather across the U.S. kept shoppers at home after a robust holiday spending season. Recent signs of stickier than expected inflation have some Wall Street strategists concerned that investors have become too optimistic about the odds of a soft landing in the U.S. economy. The stock market keeps hitting new record highs. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq both ended last week at their highest levels ever. The S&P 500 has now risen for 16 of the last 18 weeks for the first time since 1971. And Federal Reserve Chair Jeremy Powell is set to deliver a semi-annual monetary policy testimony to the House and Senate beginning on Wednesday. Investors will listen closely for his updates on the overall state of the U.S. economy, the fight against inflation, and when the central bank may begin cutting interest rates. The S&P 500 advanced to this record high, fueled by a small group of supercharged technology stocks, doesn't resemble past bubbles. Stocks with an enterprise value to sales ratio of above 10 account for 24% of total U.S. equity market capitalization versus 28% during 21 and 35% during the tech bubble. Bitcoin's blistering rally produced record inflows into spot Bitcoin ETFs and cemented the investor favorites in this new asset class. BlackRock Inc.'s iShares Bitcoin Trust and Fidelity Investments' Wise Origin Bitcoin Fund have captured 79% of total inflows into the newborn 9, a popular name for the group of new exchange-traded funds that invest directly in Bitcoin. Few obstacles seem to be in the way of Bitcoin's current rally. The largest cryptocurrency rose for the second straight day and marched closer to its all-time high, driven by expectations of exchange-traded funds' robust demand at the week's start. We have the most liquid token that has risen as much as $65,010, its first move above $65,000 since November 21. Oil steadied near the highest level this year after OPEC extended its production cuts to the end of next quarter. Brent futures traded near $84 a barrel after rising 2%. And we do have U.S. benchmark West Texas Intermediate close to $80, having breached the psychological level on Friday last week for the first time since November. Some members of the oil cartel, OPEC, led by Saudi Arabia and allied producers like Russia, again deepening their voluntary crude supply cuts. Announcements from several OPEC countries extended reductions of some 2.2 million barrels a day. Wells Fargo has said one of its primary regulators has lifted a key penalty tied to its 2016 fake accounts scandal, and Wells Fargo's stock is up 12% this year, outperforming all big bank rivals and within sight of an all-time high. One big reason is that investors believe the San Francisco lending giant is slowly starting to shed some of the problems of its past. Bank of America Corporation Savita Subramaniam is the latest equity strategist to ratchet up her target for the S&P 500 index to among the highest on Wall Street after this year's rally left forecasters blindsided. She now expects the benchmark to end the year at 5,400 compared with her earlier target of 5,000. Neuralink, under the ownership of Elon Musk, has commenced its inaugural human trials. The company is pioneering the development of chips intended to grant humans unprecedented control over devices directly through their brains, akin to superpowers. Recently, a co-founder of the company revealed that the initial patient to receive the Neuralink chip is progressing positively in recovery and has demonstrated the capability to manipulate a computer mouse using their brain. Google CEO Sundar Pichai is under growing pressure following the series of gaps and biases demonstrated by its recently launched generative AI tool Gemini. Some have even begun calling for his resignation. It is Toyota recalling more than 380,000 Tacoma pickup trucks due to an issue that could cause parts to fall off the vehicle, increasing the risk of a crash. The automaker said welding debris left on the rear axle assembly during manufacturing could cause retaining nuts to loosen over time and eventually fall off, potentially causing an axle shaft separation. Fallout from a cyber attack on one of the largest healthcare technology companies in the country is continuing to impact the entire healthcare system. More than a week after it began, Change Healthcare, a technology company that's part of Optum and owned by United Health Group, was hit with this attack last month. Disrupted patient care and hospital operations, threatened the security of patients' information, prevented some prescriptions from being filled, and delayed paychecks for medical workers. The American Hospital Association called it the most serious incident of its kind leveled against a U.S. healthcare organization. USDA's Food Safety Inspection Service has announced a recall for more than 61,000 pounds of Trader Joe's dumplings after it was found they could be contaminated with plastic. According to the recall, some of the dumplings made by CJ Foods Manufacturing could have hard plastic from a permanent marker pen inside them. The recall was made after complaints from consumers reporting they found hard plastic in Trader Joe's steamed chicken soup dumplings. There have not been any injuries caused by the recalled items. U.S. performance partially offset global momentum by Anheuser-Busch InBev according to this earnings report that was released. Organic revenue in North America fell by $1.4 billion last year. Revenue declined by 17.3%, with sales to retailers down by 12.1%, primarily due to the volume decline of Bud Light. Legendary rock singer Rod Stewart has sold his song catalog to Irving Azoff's iconic artist for nearly $100 million in a deal that comprises interests in his publishing catalog and recorded music, as well as some name and likeness rights. And when it comes to brick and mortar retail footprints in the U.S., it's becoming harder and harder to compete with Dollar General. The franchise, which started with a lone store in Springfield, Kentucky way back in 1955, recently opened its 2,000th location in Alice, Texas. In the third quarter of last year, 260 new locations opened, helping push the franchise's sales up 2.4% to almost $10 billion. Dollar General has additional plans to open another 800 new stores this year, as well as remodel 1,500 locations. Jennifer spent her weekend calling California voters, urging them to cast their ballot in tomorrow's primary election for Democrat Peter Dixon. But unlike her human counterparts, Jennifer is a creation of artificial intelligence, allowing her to make thousands of calls without taking a break or losing her cool. When you think of the best cities in the country for tech, the Silicon Valley in California is tops of the list. For Texas, Austin has staked its claim recently for technological prowess. However, another city in the Lone Star State is making a name for itself, specifically for women working in the tech industry. And it's right here in North Texas, Garland ranked as the 9th best city in the U.S. for women in the tech industry. According to an NBC DFW poll, the study analyzed income-generating potential, housing markets, opportunities for women, and overall locations to rank the top 100 cities. A Sam's Club in Grapevine is holding a celebration to reopen its gas pumps after the store was damaged by a tornado in 2022, and a total of 16 tornadoes were confirmed in North Texas, and 2 of them hit Grapevine. The mayor there says 5 people had minor injuries and 10 buildings were damaged. And among the buildings damaged were the Sam's Club near Highway 114, and the company said the location would close permanently, but in December, Walmart reversed course, saying that the store would reopen. Richardson School District is holding another listening session tonight, where school leaders and parents have a chance to discuss Project Right Size, the district's plan to close or consolidate 5 elementary schools. The superintendent says cuts have to be made because of budget constraints and declining enrollment. The schools impacted include Greenwood Hills Elementary, Spring Ridge, Spring Valley, Thurgood Marshall, and Dobie Pre-K, and the plan would save the district nearly $11 million. And the meeting is tonight at 6 o'clock at the Lake Highlands High School. Richardson closing its animal shelter today and tomorrow as part of a major renovation project, and voters approved funding to improve the Richardson Animal Shelter. Construction is about to begin on that project. Richardson is also holding its 3rd annual Traffic Signal Box Art Contest, letting local artists paint signal boxes since 2 years ago, and it's looking for more artists to paint 5 more boxes this year. And we're about to get a better idea what the future of Fort Worth's Panther Island will be. HR&A advisors unveiling its final vision for the economic development of Panther Island at a pair of meetings at a special meeting of the Tarrant Regional Water District's Board of Directors at the Fort Worth City Council work session. While the bypass channel portion of the massive project is being funded in part through a $403 million federal grant, the development of what will be inside the man-made island will be the result of a public-private partnership. China is determined to dominate the future of the auto market, including by using unfair practices, said President Biden. China's policies could floor our market with its vehicles, posing risks to our national security. And per an October article that was published by the Kelley Blue Book, there are no cars built by Chinese automakers available in America today, but China's automakers are planning to cross that border very soon. Apple was hit with a European Union antitrust fine of over 1.8 billion euros today. It's first ever for preventing Spotify and other music streaming services from informing users of payment options outside its App Store. European shares paused near a record high after 6 weeks of gains as investors waited for reassurance that central banks are on track to cut interest rates in the coming months. And Japan's Nikkei 225 stock average climbed above the psychological level of 40,000 for the first time, opening the door to further gains in its historic rally. Japan's benchmark Nikkei index surpassing the 40,000 mark for the first time this morning. The blue chip gauge rose 0.5% to close at 40,109.23 on heavy market turnover. Tech shares, which have helped push equities higher over the past year, led the way with the Advantis Corporation among the top performers. The Nikkei rose as much as 1% early in the day today, and Japan is considering calling an end of deflation in the wake of rising prices, a move that would turn a new page for the world's 4th largest economy after decades of economic stagnation scarred a generation of workers and investors. Confidence booster shot. Moody's Investor Service has significantly revised its GDP forecast for India today, citing the robust momentum observed in the South Asian economy in recent quarters, which the ratings agency anticipates will persist into this entire year. India's economy was demonstrated a strong performance, and the better than anticipated data last year has prompted us to revise the growth projection for this year to 6.8% from 6.1%. India has waded into global AI debate by issuing an advisory that requires significant tech firms to get government permission before launching new models. And back in 2017, when Apple opened the doors to its developer center in Bengaluru, things were different. For starters, it was called the App Accelerator, and as preposterous as it may come across, Apple was still finding its mighty feet in a tricky market called India. The Chinese players had made their presence felt by targeting the price-conscious Indian buyer, and the iPhone was out of reach for many, yet retained an aspirational value. Not that the iPhone has become affordable, but Apple has been selling them by the millions. Adani Group began marketing a $409 million bond in what would be its first dollar note sale after a report last year by short seller Hindenburg Research, adding to signs of a rebound in investor confidence. And markets regulator SEBI has given the go-ahead for a 3,500 crore rupee IPO by Go Digital General Insurance, promoted by Canadian billionaire Prem Vatsa's Fairfax Group and industry veteran Kamesh Goyal. We have the Indian Central Bank likely to take delivery of a $5 billion forex swap maturing next week in the wake of the adequate dollar inflows and rupee liquidity staying on the tighter side. The budget for financial year 24-25 to be tabled today would be based on the concept of Ram Rajya. Sources in Delhi have said that, and this time the theme of the budget, special attention given to all sections of people in this election year. We do have this year's interim budget given a thrust on the enhancement of rail infrastructure. The company is also opting for capacity enhancement to implement the centre's transformative vision announced by Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman last month. The opening of an authentic Indian cuisine restaurant in Singapore is a good example of India's soft power service to the world and the popularity of Indian cuisine globally. India's High Commissioner was in Singapore, and one of our top and highly rated brands is getting into Singapore, and I hope it will develop the demand for Indian cuisine, he said. A good example of soft power service to the world and the Indian cuisine, well liked globally, at the opening of the Bombay Brasserie. And the guests and dignitaries who attended this opening there at the business district complex of restaurants and food outlets and the five-star hotel of JW Marriott in Singapore. Indian restaurants have gone global and customized as well as blended with local foods over a period, and very authentic Indian cuisine required the world over, and Bombay Brasserie represented the same. Indian Hotels Company would soon expand its footprint in San Francisco in the US, and Germany's Frankfurt. Singapore launch marks the restaurant's first foray into the Southeast Asian region and fourth global outpost after successful ventures in London, Dubai, and Cape Town. Shazia Syed, the former CEO of Unilever Pakistan, has been named in a Forbes list again, this time for the 100 most powerful businesswomen 2024. She is currently the general manager for Unilever's operations in North Africa, Iraq, Levant, and Arabia. Had previously been recognized as one of the top executives in the Middle East last year. From leading Unilever's personal care in Vietnam to steering as CEO in Sri Lanka and later ascending as the global executive vice president for Unilever's beverage empire, her trajectory is a tale of unparalleled success. She has also advocated for women's empowerment and advancement in the dynamic world of business both in Pakistan and beyond. In parallel with engaging the International Monetary Fund for a more extensive, comprehensive 25th program, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's government is poised to prioritize the China-Pakistan economic corridor. As many as 27 Chinese containers loaded with agricultural equipment have entered Pakistan after the Kunjara Pass was temporarily opened as a trial run throughout the year for cross-border trade. And a resolution to have Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, X and YouTube banned in Pakistan to protect the younger generation from their negative and devastating effects has landed in the Senate and is on the House's agenda to be debated upon during today's session. Another steward of Pakistan International Airlines has reportedly gone missing from Canada, making it the second such incident in a week. The 47-year-old was part of a cabin crew on the PK-783 from Karachi to Toronto, and he was scheduled to report for the return and went missing. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the financial news for you for today, which is Monday, the 4th of March. And I have huge thanks going out to those that support community radio networks to bring all this information to you. Big thanks going out to Discount Power, to Houston EB5, to the Ahluwalia Law Offices, to the Wyndham Hotel in Irving, to Digital X-Force, Kinzer Law, Michaelachi, Sri Vimal, as well as Mystic Mandala and Flashbrush Productions. I do have some stories from the annals of history that happened on today's date, the 4th of August, and that's coming up for you next. Stay tuned. All right, let's get to some stories from the annals of history that happened on today's date, which is the 4th of March. The first session of the U.S. Congress was held in New York City as the U.S. Constitution takes effect. However, of the 22 senators and 59 representatives called to represent the 11 states who had ratified the document, only 9 senators and 13 reps showed up to begin negotiations for its amendments. This, ladies and gentlemen, happened on today's date in 1789. We do have the government under the U.S. Constitution beginning on the 4th of March in 1789. And in 1829, on the 4th of March, Andrew Jackson upholds an inaugural tradition begun by Thomas Jefferson and hosts an open house in the White House. After his swearing-in ceremony and address to Congress, the new president returned to the White House to meet and greet a flock of politicians, celebrities, and citizens. Very shortly, the crowd swelled to more than 20,000, turning the usually dignified White House into a boisterous mob scene. Some guests stood on furniture and muddy shoes, while others rummaged through rooms looking for the president, breaking dishes, crystal, and grinding food into the carpet along the way. White House staff reported the carpet smelled of cheese for months after the party. In an attempt to draw partygoers out of the building, servants set up wash tubs full of juice and whiskey on the White House lawn. The White House open house tradition continued until several assassination attempts heightened security concerns, and the trend ended in 1885 when Grover Cleveland opted instead to host a parade which he viewed in safety from a grandstand set up in front of the White House. But it was this open house at the White House that was held on today's date in 1829 by Andrew Jackson. Abraham Lincoln becomes the 16th President of the United States on today's date in the year 1861. In his inauguration speech, he extended an olive branch to the South, but also made it clear that he intended to enforce federal laws in the states that seceded. Just before breakfast on the morning of the 4th of March in the year 1918, Private Albert Gitchell of the U.S. Army reports to the hospital at Fort Riley in Kansas, complaining of cold-like symptoms of sore throat, fever, and headache. Soon after, over 100 of his fellow soldiers had reported similar symptoms, marking what are believed to be the first cases in the historic influenza pandemic of 1918, later known as the Spanish flu. The flu would eventually kill 675,000 Americans and an estimated 20 million to 50 million people around the world, proving to be a far deadlier force than even the First World War. The initial outbreak of this disease that was reported on today's date in the year 1918 was followed by similar outbreaks in army camps and prisoners in various regions of the country, and the disease soon traveled to Europe, with the American soldiers heading to aid the Allies on the battlefields of France. Once it arrived on the second continent, the flu showed no signs of abating. 31,000 cases were reported in June in Great Britain. The disease was eventually dubbed the Spanish flu because people erroneously believed Spain was the epicenter of this pandemic, and the flu showed no mercy of combatants on either side of the trenches. Over the summer, the first wave of the epidemic hit German forces on the Western Front, where they were waging a final no-holds-barred offensive that would determine the outcome of the war. It had a significant effect on the already weakening morale of the troops, as Germany Army Commander Crown Prince Ruprecht wrote, "Poor provisions, heavy losses, and the deepening influenza have deeply depressed the spirits of men in the infantry division." And meanwhile, the flu was spreading fast beyond the borders of Western Europe due to its exceptionally high rate of virulence and the massive transport of men on land and aboard ships due to the war effort. And by the end of the summer, numerous cases have been reported in Russia and North Africa and India, China, Japan, and the Philippines, and even New Zealand would eventually fall victim to this well. Now, the Great War ended on the 11th of November, but influenza continued to wreak international havoc, flaring again in the U.S. in an even more vicious way, with the return of soldiers from the war and eventually infecting an estimated 28% of the country's population before it finally petered out. In its December 28th issue, the American Medical Association acknowledged the end of one momentous conflict and urged the acceptance of a new challenge: fighting infectious disease. That was the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918 that started on today's date. And on the 4th of March, today's date, in 1933, at the height of the Great Depression, Franklin Delano Roosevelt is inaugurated as the 36th President of the U.S. In his famous inaugural address he delivered outside the East Wing of the U.S. Capitol, he outlined his New Deal and expansion of the federal government as an instrument of employment opportunity and welfare, and told Americans that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. It was a rainy day in Washington that day, and the gusts of rain blew over as he spoke. He delivered a speech that radiated optimism and competence, and a broad majority of the Americans united behind their new president and his radical economic proposals to lead the nation out of this great depression. That was FDR, who was inaugurated as the 32nd President of the United States on today's date in 1933. Ernest Hemingway completes a short novel called The Old Man and the Sea. He wrote to his publisher the same day, saying he had finished the book and that it was the best writing he had ever done. The critics agreed. The book won the Pulitzer Prize in 1953 and became one of his best-selling works. But it was on today's date that he actually completed the book. The novella, which was first published in the Life magazine, was an allegory referring to the writer's own struggles to preserve his art in the face of fame and attention. Hemingway had become a cult figure whose 4 marriages and adventurous exploits in big game hunting and fishing were widely covered in the press. But despite his fame, he had not produced a major literary work in a decade before he wrote The Old Man and the Sea, and the book would be his last significant work of fiction before his suicide in 1961. During the 30s and 40s, the hard-drinking Hemingway lived in Key West and then in Cuba while continuing to travel widely. He was wounded in a plane crash in 1953, after which he became increasingly anxious and depressed, and like his father, he died by suicide, shooting himself in 1961 in his home in Idaho. But of course, he's best known for that novel, The Old Man and the Sea, that he completed on today's date in the year 1952. On the 4th of March in 1952, also, actor and future President Ronald Reagan marries his second wife, actress Nancy Davis, and the couple wed in Los Angeles at the Little Brown Church in the Valley. Nancy Davis, whose real name is Anne Frances Robbins, met her husband at the MGM Studios. They signed a contract and billed her as Nancy Davis for a first screen role in the film Shadow on the Wall. And the two met while Reagan was serving as president of the Screen Actors Guild, and Nancy was embroiled in an effort to remove her name from the notorious McCarthy-era Hollywood blacklist of possible communist sympathizers. And the list actually referred to another actress of the same name, but it was preventing her from finding work, so the future First Lady contacted Reagan to see if he, as SAG president, could help clear up the confusion. The two fell in love and were married a year later, and their first child, Patricia, was born 7 months after the wedding. That wedding was held on today's date in 1952. Actor and future President Ronald Reagan marrying his second wife, actress Nancy Davis. It was on today's date in 1960, after 20 tumultuous years of marriage, actress Lucille Ball files for divorce from her husband and collaborator Desi Arnaz. On the 4th of March in 1960, the breakup of the couple, stars of the hit sitcom I Love Lucy and owners of the innovative Daisy Lou Studios, was one of the highest profile divorces in American history at that time. They had met 5 years. She had met her 5-year junior while she was acting, and he was leading a band in the film Too Many Girls. They married 6 months later, and though the two were by all accounts deeply in love for most of their lives, the relationship was always tumultuous due to both of them being in show business and to Arnaz's womanizing and problems with alcohol. Lucille Ball first sought to divorce 4 years into the marriage, but they reconciled and determined to strengthen their relationship by finding opportunities to work together. And when CBS asked her to develop a sitcom, she insisted on having her real-life husband play her husband on the show. The network was hesitant to cast a Cuban-American as a co-lead, but the couple convinced them by putting on a live show and conducting a successful tour. I Love Lucy ran from 1951 to 57, popular for the entirety of its run, won 5 Emmys, and continues to be regarded as one of the most influential programs in American history. Once again, challenging the powers that be, Ball and Arnaz wrote her pregnancy with their second child into the show, making it the first television program to depict a pregnancy. Desi Lou Studios, which founded to produce the show, was for a time the largest independent production company in the country, and it produced a number of shows besides I Love Lucy, including Mission Impossible and the original Star Trek. I Love Lucy and its successor, the Lucy Daisy comedy show, are lovingly poked fun at married life in modern America. However, the underlying problems of the real-life marriage it was based on never went away. Lucille Ball filed for divorce in 1960. On today's date, the 4th of March, and bought out Annals' share in Desilu 2 years later, becoming the first woman to run a major television studio. And though the divorce was reportedly contentious, the two remained close for the rest of their lives, which they each spent in show business. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the story of Lucille Ball and her husband when they starred together, real-life couple also.
My friend.
And also in their shows on television.
Once more, this time from It's So Tasty Too.
It's so tasty too.
That's right.
It's so tasty too. Just
That-
like candy. You know, this stuff tastes pretty good once you get used to it.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Lucille Ball in I Love Lucy. And continuing with the showbiz, I have another story from the annals of history that happened on today's date. In 1966, an offhand John Lennon comment appears there in the London Evening Standard, and months later it erupted in the bigger-than-Jesus scandal that brought a semi-official end to the giddy phenomenon known as Beatlemania. In England, no one took much notice of Lennon's quote that later set off a media frenzy in America. Chalk it up to a fundamental difference in religious outlook between Britain and America, or to a fundamental difference in sense of humor. Whatever the reason, it was only after the American press got a hold of his words some 5 months later that Lennon's comments set off a firestorm. In their original context, Lennon's remarks were clearly meant not as a boast, but as a sardonic commentary on the waning importance of religion. Christianity will go, he said. It will vanish and shrink. We're more popular than Jesus now. It was only one comment in an interview that covered such wide-ranging topics as gorilla suits and car phones, but it was this comment alone that made its way into the American teeny bopper. That magazine datebook several months later, boiling down to the straightforward line, "We're more popular than Jesus." From there, a handful of Bible Belt disc jockeys took over, declaring Lennon's remarks blasphemous and vowing an eternal ban on all Beatles music, past, present, and future. Our fantastic Beatle boycott is still in effect, announced two DJs on Birmingham radio. Don't forget to take your Beatle records and your Beatle paraphernalia to any one of our 14 pickup joints in Birmingham, Alabama, and turn them in this week. The plan in Birmingham, as in various other cities around the South, was to burn the Beatles' records turned in by angry listeners, though it is unclear how many such events really took place. The story of the burnings definitely reached the Beatles. When they started burning our records, that was a real shock, said John Lennon years later. I couldn't go away knowing I'd created another little piece of hate in the world, so I apologized. The apology Lennon offered was not for the message he was trying to convey, but for conveying it in a way that confused its meaning. At a press conference in Chicago, John Lennon explained, "I'm not anti-God, anti-Christ or anti-religion. I was not saying we are greater or better. I believe in God, but not as one thing, not as an old man in the sky. I'm sorry I said it, really. I never meant it to be a lousy anti-religious thing. From what I've read or observed, Christianity just seems to be shrinking, to be losing contact," he said. And that was the apology by John Lennon to those remarks that he made. And of course, some of it can also be seen in a song that he had written.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try.
I have one more story from the annals of history that happened on the 4th of March, and this was in the year 2005, when billionaire mogul Martha Stewart is released from a federal prison near Alderson, West Virginia, after serving 5 months for lying about her sale of I'm clone stock in 2001. After her televised exit from the facility, she flew on a chartered jet from nearby Greenbrier International Airport to New York, where she would serve out her remaining 5-month home confinement on a 153-acre Bedford, New York estate. It was in 2001 where she sold about 4,000 shares of I'm Clone Systems, a company run by her friend Sam Waxel that develops cancer therapy drugs. The next day, the company's stock tanked after news broke that I'm Clone's newest cancer drug, Erbitux, had been rejected by the FDA. Waxel, who had sold stock before the drug's rejection, was made public, arrested on charges of insider trading, and later sentenced to more than 7 years in prison. When questioned about a sale of the stock, he denied any insider knowledge and said that the stock was sold based on a previously made agreement with her stockbroker of Merrill Lynch. The next month is suspended by Merrill Lynch when investigators were unable to confirm that such an agreement actually existed. In September 2002, the Department of Justice began to investigate Martha Stewart's stock sale and alleged insider trading. Less than a year later, she was indicted on charges of security fraud and obstruction of justice, and subsequently resigned as chairman and CEO of the company she founded, Martha Stewart Living Omni Media, though she remained on the company's board. Her trial began in 2003. Days into the trial, her former assistant, Douglas Fanuel, testified that he had been ordered to inform Stewart that she should sell her I'm Clone stock. Soon after, a friend of hers testified that she told her she knew Sam Waxel had been trying to sell the stock before dumping her own shares. Though the judge dropped the securities fraud charge against Stewart for lack of evidence, she was convicted on all remaining counts of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and making false statements. Public opinion polls at the time showed that many Americans believed that she should serve prison time. Others thought she had been unfairly targeted by over-aggressive prosecutors. And in 2004, she was sentenced to 5 months in prison and 5 months of home confinement, in addition to being fined $30,000 and given 2 years probation. She could have received up to 16 years in prison. She requested to serve her time immediately and was sent to the minimum security facility in West Virginia. Despite fears that her legal battle might devastate her financial empire, Martha Stewart Living Omni Media's stock price climbed dramatically during her incarceration, with values quadrupling by the time of her March 2005 release on today's date, the 4th of August. And during her subsequent home confinement, she was forced to wear an electronic ankle bracelet to monitor her movement, and was able to leave home only for 48 hours each week, and only to go to work. Immediately upon completion of her sentence, she began work on 2 new NBC television shows, a primetime spin-off of the reality series The Apprentice, and a daytime variety show called Martha. Those, ladies and gentlemen, were some stories from the annals of history that happened on today's date, the 4th of August. Unseasonably warm weather today, where we are waking up to very cloudy and mild conditions, temperatures in the 60s. Sunshine will break out a little later, and another warm day here for us in North Texas. Afternoon highs will reach the low 80s again, just like they did over the weekend. There's also a chance of an isolated shower or storm by this evening, but more towards our east and southeast, not really on us. And then another warm day on the way for tomorrow, with again the mid 80s. We do have the March primaries tomorrow, and so it is election day tomorrow. Don't forget to vote. This Friday, the India Association of North Texas is celebrating International Women's Day, and that event is happening. Invest in Women, Accelerate Progress. It's happening in Frisco at the Collin College Frisco Campus Conference Center on Wade Boulevard in Frisco from 5:30 to 8 this Friday. International Women's Day. Invest in Women, Accelerate Progress. Warmly inviting all of you to join us for the UN International Women's Day celebration starting at 5:30. And then we do have on Saturday the Light from 10:30 to noon, warmly invited to celebrate Shivaratri, the incarnation of the Supreme Being, the Supreme Light, the one who is the bestower of the third eye of knowledge and knower of the three aspects of time. Experience the divine powers through meditation at the Brahma Kumaris and their meditation center on Josie Lane in Farmers Branch. You can register at BKRY, Brahma Kumaris Raja Yoga Meditation.us. We have the Holi Festival starting later this month, and there will be the 14th Annual Festival of Colors there being by Mystic Mandala. You can get more information at DallasFestivalOfColors.com. And the Texas Women's Society is presenting the McKinney Asian Festival on the 23rd from 11 to 6 at the Dr. Glenn Mitchell Memorial Park in McKinney. We do have a holistic festival coming up on the 29th and 30th of this month, the Easter weekend, at the Cotton Mill in McKinney. It's a 2-day market there. And the Success Door, supporting the Pledge Campaign Foundation, is presenting Fly, First Love Yourself, Season 4. And that is going to be happening on the 6th of April at the Dew Event Center in Louisville from 4 to 8. Tips 5K and 10K run and walk is happening on Sunday the 7th of April at the Oak Point Preserve on Spring Creek Parkway in Plano. It starts at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you can register at runsignup.com. Online registration is required. Brought to you by TIPS, the Texas Indo-American Physicians Society. Also want you to know about this mentorship program by TIPS. Beginning this year, TIPS NEC, the Northeast chapter, is inaugurating a mentorship program to help students of Indian and South Asian origin. This is for medical students in the North Texas region and graduates of the Indian Medical School who are looking for residency positions, fellowships, clinical and research observerships, as well as jobs. You can go ahead and make use of these opportunities. Get more information at mentorship@tipsnec.org. So these are some of the events that are happening here in town. The U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce had a very, very successful women's conference last Friday, and now they will be having their business plan round for the Spirit of Innovation Technology competition and business plan competition on the 12th of April. You can get more information on the Chamber's website, which is usicoc.org. Pratham's Gala, inviting all of you to this amazing gala that we have every year, changing lives, transforming communities. An invitation to the Pratham Gala on the 20th of April at the Omni Frisco Hotel with special guest Vidya Box, the YouTuber and singer, and Krish Dhanam, speaker as well as author. Thrilled to invite you to the 2024 Pratham Dallas Fort Worth Gala. This is an extraordinary evening dedicated to empowering children and young people in India to transform their lives and communities. 20th of April at the Omni Frisco Hotel, changing lives, transforming communities by Pratham, with highlighting the remarkable impact of Pratham's work in expanding access to quality learning opportunities. So please remember, 20th of April, join us for this unforgettable evening of exquisite dining, inspiring company, and a cause that truly matters. For the first time in American television history, PBS stations across the U.S. will show a new documentary film on Swami Vivekananda called America's First Guru, and that too a first by an Indian origin documentary filmmaker. The new feature-length documentary film called America's First Guru will be broadcast on public television in May of this year, telling the compelling story of how yoga, Vedanta, and the highest ideals of Indian wisdom first entered the popular American conversation in 1893 with the arrival of Swami Vivekananda at the first World's Parliament of Religion in Chicago, and how in 6 short years he traveled across the country, transforming American religion, culture, interfaith dialogue, and gender equality. He celebrated the universality and pluralism of all faiths and changed the way the West saw India forever, and in doing so became America's first guru. Please do remember that would be happening this summer. And as we have more information about events happening here in town, we'll bring them to you right here on Community Radio Networks. I do have huge thanks going out to Discount Power, to Houston EB5, to the Alualia Law Offices, the Wyndham Hotel in Irving, Digital X-Force, KinzerLaw.com, the Michaelachi Restaurant, the Ruchi Palace, Sri Vimal, Vimal's Venue, Eggholic, Mystic Mandala, and Flash Rush Productions. And that's my show for today, right here on Community Radio Networks. Every morning we get you all the information ready for you to take on the day. Today is the 4th of March.